Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Frank Spencer. I'm the principal at Kedge and lead instructor at the Future School. And thank you for joining me today. I'm going to be giving a brief tutorial on pattern recognition or pattern making or pattern development. Now, patterns are very, very important to futures and foresight work. You often hear it said that trend hunting or environmental scanning or trend scouting is the lifeblood of foresight. And that may very well be true, but at Kedge we like to say that pattern making is actually the beating heart of futures work. So if trend hunting or environmental scanning is the lifeblood, then the beating heart, the actual thing that makes it tick and move and causes that blood to circulate, is actually pattern and sense making. So I'm going to show you today just a very, very brief tutorial on how to do some pattern making using trends and data and emerging issues and research. There'll be much more that can be said about pattern making beyond this brief tutorial, but I want to give you just a little bit of insight into what that looks like. So have you ever stepped on a Lego in the middle of the night? You know, if you have a Lego set or your kids play with Legos, or maybe you play with Legos, and you get up in the middle of the night to go get something to drink or go to the bathroom, and you step on a Lego. We've all done it, or most of us have done it, and boy, that is an excruciating pain. So I want you to remember that pain when you think about doing foresight and futures work and just plotting trends or singular issues on a graph or on a 2x2 matrix and looking at them in isolation. Trends in isolation are much like Legos before they've been put together. And if you step on them, I want you to remember that pain. It's painful to use trends only in foresight work because it really doesn't help us to understand the larger context of what's evolving. What do I mean by that? Well, in the real world, trends don't remain in isolation. They're not isolated off in some laboratory or in a petri dish somewhere made by mad scientists. In the real world, they're really colliding and converging and coming together. And when that happens, they're creating what we like to call emerging landscapes of change. Emerging landscapes of change. Let's take each one of those words for just a moment. Emerging, something that's right in front of us that we haven't quite yet seen, but that is coming to pass or coming to be. So think about trends for just a moment. When we think about trends in isolation, and we hear the word trend, we often think about the future. But in reality, the reason we know about trends is because they're here today. Trends are really the present, and we know about them. So, of course, they do have direction to them, and they do show us sort of where things are going. But if we think about them colliding or converging as they go out into the world, if we put additive manufacturing out there with the sharing economy, we can't just focus only on the sharing economy. We have to understand how other trends in society and politics and the environment and economics, et cetera, are all coming together to make these emerging or what's right in front of us. Landscapes, in other words, they're not just small little pieces like trends are. Landscapes are a larger territory. I like to say islands of change sometimes. And what I mean by that is that if you work in the healthcare industry and you think that a certain technological trend is all that really matters to you, and you just ignore a lot of these trends that look more social or more entertainment focused, when you do trend hunting, you often do that. But in reality, as some technology that impacts healthcare is colliding with environmental or entertainment or consumer trends, is changing the way that people think and live and operate and have their expectations, right? And so these islands, these larger landscapes, they sweep across industries and across the world and across society, and nobody is going to escape them. I could throw away one trend out of an entire pattern that I've made, and that pattern would still be intact. And so even if I ignore trend X or trend Y or trend Z, that pattern is still going to impact my industry. So it's a landscape of change. And so, of course, all foresight is about change, but when we talk about change in foresight, often we're not talking about incremental change, we're talking about transformative change. And when we look at pattern making, we see beyond the trends that are singular and linear and tend to make us myopically focus on them. And instead, we look at these major patterns, or these islands of change, or emerging islands of change that are bringing about transformative change, that take us from what seems like incremental change to something that's much more transformative. Let me give you an example from nature. What I often say to my clients, if I have an acorn And I think about my industry. If I'm an acorn maker, or I think that I'm an acorn maker, and I have an acorn, the transformative result of that acorn is not a million acorns. I think it is because I can't wait to sell a million acorns. If I'm working for Apple and I've made the iPhone, I want to sell a million iPhones. But foresight helps to see the changes in society and economics and demographics and so on and so on that really break the chain of those kinds of things and really get us broken away from incrementalism. And so, what is really inside of an acorn? An oak tree. We see something very transformative. But when you look at that acorn, you don't see an oak tree. You have to be able to intuit. You have to be able to recognize. You have to be able to pattern that acorn, that oak tree inside that acorn, and that's how pattern recognition, pattern making works. So I've said a lot about that. There's so much more to say about pattern making, including where do I get all my information from, because we don't want to just look at trends. We want to look at values that are behind the trends, and we want to look at the impacts and implications from the trends. And there's a lot of tools in foresight that can help us to look at those and find those different things. But let's imagine for a moment today, we have trends, we have data, we have emerging issues, we have the values, we have the impacts, and now we have basically all of these stars in the sky. And that's another great analogy for pattern making, by the way, because if I look into the sky and I look at one star, like one trend, that's all I see. But if I understand to look at a certain grouping of stars, values, trends, issues, emerging ideas, data, research, then I'm going to see a constellation. So pattern making is like constellation viewing, not just looking at individual stars in the sky, and the constellations are actually what helped the early explorers to navigate the sky, right? So that's a very brief primer on what patterns are. Let's just make a pattern real quick. How about that? Great. So I've got my handy dandy trend cards here that Kedge puts out every year or 2 years sometimes. We've actually got others in, sort of in the hopper right now, and I've got some actually I think in the stack that are, but we'll be seeing a new set relatively soon. And so let's imagine for a moment that I've got the trend and all of the values and the research of the data that goes behind additive manufacturing. So additive manufacturing, basically 3D printing, 4D printing, we talk about 5D printing today, and printing objects and printing with high-grade plastics, but also printing with organic materials, maybe even printing hearts for people. And so we've got additive manufacturing, and a lot of that really can be done at home. You download the IP or the diagrams or the templates online, and people can actually do this at home. And as we've seen more and more of the IP around additive manufacturing becoming public, then we see greater opportunity for consumers or the public to actually print their own stuff at home. And we may see more of this in the future. We probably will definitely see more of it in large-scale industry now. And let's imagine that I have the trend of what we got next. Oh, collaborative consumption. So the sharing economy. We share bikes, and we share leaf blowers, and we share wedding dresses. And there's a company I think that shares lunchtime leftover meals, which is sort of gross, but sharing. That we understand that sharing helps the economy, it helps the environment, it helps people, it helps in terms of equality and equity, et cetera, et cetera. So we're sharing our resources and sharing those things so that we all don't have to own, that access to assets is greater than ownership of assets. That's another trend. What do we got next? We've got reputation currency. And this is the idea that my reputation online and social media actually buys me ability, that my understanding of a subject matter, my expertise in a subject matter actually gets me more likes or more hits, actually puts me at the front of my industry as a thought leader. And so my reputation currency is as good as money. It's like currency. It's like data currency, but this is my reputation, largely online, but across the world as we're more connected today. My reputation stands as currency and can actually buy me a lot of things today, and we can really go deep with that trend. Here's also the idea of personalization. Been around for a long, long time, but we're seeing it more and more today. And even as we're seeing a great collective come together, we're also seeing people being able to personalize things, right? And so this thing was made specifically for me, or this watch was made specifically for me with my name on it, with my DNA embedded in it. Let's go there for a second. What about the idea of medicine? So I can take personalized therapies, and I can have medicine that really is based off of my own DNA, and so that the therapies are directly related to me and given to me, and they work best for me and not for another person. Very important for the days that we live in right now. So personalization. And then last but not least, we have the trend of pop-up spaces. And this is the idea that stores and industries and products pop up in different spaces so that they can really see who will like to buy a product or experience or a service and where it might work best. But this is also, relative to education or to entertainment, really being able to target our audiences with what they need on demand in real time, and then take it away when it's not needed. Cities may pop up like this. We see music festivals already that are really pop-up spaces, and really that changes the game in terms of industry and retail and entertainment, et cetera, so pop-up spaces. So we had, 4 or 5 trends here: additive manufacturing, collaborative consumption, reputation currency, personalization, and pop-up spaces. And this really leads me, when I think about them all coming together, what do they have in common? What is the pattern that we're making? Again, this is an oversimplification of pattern making, but was just a brief tutorial so that you can get started on your own pattern making and foresight work. We would call this the creator economy. And what that basically means is that today, through technologies, but through social change, zeitgeist, and value change, and these different trends that we just looked at, plus many, many, many more, we're seeing the desire for people to have their fingerprint or their thumbprint on everything that's done, for them to have connection with the industries or the companies or the products and services they buy from, to be a part of being making that. We see it today in Indiegogo and funding campaigns, and we see it across social media, and everybody wanting to be a part of what's actually produced or made so that it is more relevant not only to me, but to our needs, and that we are all creators. And so we see that in the maker movement as well. And these trends together collectively, plus many, many more, would suggest that we have a pattern or an emerging landscape of change that we might call the creator economy. By the way, the name is a name. A rose by any other name, still a rose. You could have named this something quite differently. As a matter of fact, you might have seen a different pattern in there, and you're probably thinking of some trends that could have been added to this set of trends that I just showed you that might make a different kind of pattern or suggest something quite differently, or maybe you even saw something different in these patterns. That's all legitimate. And we could say that this is somewhat up for debate, but as we dive deeper into the actual research around this, and we do this over a period of time, not 5 minutes, not 10 minutes, but over a longer period of time, we look not just at 6 trends, but hundreds of trends, then we can really do the research around the real patterns, the strong, robust patterns that are actually forming. This is just a tutorial and a still-test exercise. Would you like to do another one? Just quickly, I'll go quicker this time since you already know the game. How about the trend of post-citizenship? We're seeing this across countries today, where people are actually using social media, digital technology, virtual technology, to actually be citizens of other countries. Estonia allows you to be an e-resident of their country, but countries like Dubai are actually saying that they might move to post-citizenship or digital citizenship so that you can receive all of the benefits of the country even though you aren't in the country. And so we're seeing this idea of a move towards post-citizenship. It's been in books like Parag Khanna's Connectivity or Connectography, I believe is the name of the book, but I probably got that wrong. You can look it up. Network Matter, the Internet of Things. Not only are all things connected across the Internet, but we're seeing our inanimate objects and even ourselves connected across the Internet. So that great connectivity, which sort of blurs the lines and makes things intangible, and giving you a clue already about what our pattern might be. And then you see digital business models. I don't think I have to explain this one a lot, but especially today where I'm talking from, that's really important. We see a lot of businesses moving online. We've seen it for a long time, and we'll probably see it even more as people are realizing that their businesses can be digital and don't have to be physical. Open source, the IP and the idea around IP is changing, and that people are freely sharing a lot of things. Elon Musk a couple of years ago shared all of his Tesla plans, and everybody was like, yeah, man, but it really does sort of give a hint of just openly sharing this stuff and knowing that the real value is not in hiding the IP. The real value is in producing and creating and what we give as an experience, our expertise, et cetera, et cetera. And then we've got hyperlocal, which most people know as, worrying about our local community and being resilient. But as we live in a digital age, that hyperlocal can be post-citizen. I could be 8 or 80 and we can have an online chess community. And we have our own hyperlocal, our intangible hyperlocal community. So hyperlocal can go far beyond physical localities to digital or virtual localities. And then we have augmented reality. Primarily it's a technology, but when you think about augmented reality more as a philosophy or as an experience, then it really means augmenting our surroundings so that I don't just see a tree outside, but when I see that tree, I can wear technology or be in or surrounded by technology that will tell me all about the tree, the building, the spaces, the people all around us, and so that I get all the information coming to me in real time. And then blockchain, which eliminates the middleman and basically acts as a technological ledger or e-ledger that eliminates the need for a lot of the middleman and allows us to connect with one another and buy and sell and produce while having the authenticity intact. Across the blockchain, millions of computers, and if you just take one of the computers out, it still doesn't break the chain. The chain is intact. I authenticate you, you authenticate me. Passports can be made this way. We can have a blockchain of citizens authenticating each other across the world, a blockchain of people that actually understand who has gotten the coronavirus and who hasn't. How about that? What if we call this pattern digital lifestyles? You might have thought of a different one. But with all this put together, we can see how life is becoming much more digital, or at least is a blur or a blend between what we would call the physical realm and the digital realm, and the two become one. And we haven't really had a word quite yet for the physical meets the digital. We keep arguing about physical, digital, and there might be a phygital. I think I've heard somebody say that before, although I don't like that word. You probably could make a better one. But digital lifestyles, and you would add many, many, many other trends and all of the data that surrounds it and values that come from it, like the stars in the sky to make patterns. But this is a brief primer of pattern making. I hope you've enjoyed it. Go make your own patterns, and we will see you again on another tutorial or at another time. Take care.